Hello, I'm Allie, and I work for Nation's Photo Lab, and we are going to do a critique and technique with Tamara Lackey. That's her. And she picked the images that she'd like to critique, and the 5 images that she selected, you can email me at allie@nationsphotolab.com and claim your prize of a $100 lab credit to Nations Photo Lab. And please,
it's $100 each or total?
Each of you will get $100 to Nations Photo Lab on any of our products. So without further ado, Tamara is going to take the stage, and I hope everyone enjoys the webinar. So all yours, Tamara.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Do you think we can spontaneously add, as I'm live now, like a $50 gift to like for the best question or something like that?
Definitely.
One of them or 2 of them?
2.
No. Okay. Awesome. We're going to give out 3 additional $50 credits for best questions as we go. Sometimes we get the same question over and over again, and I love new good questions. So even if it's not your question, but you want to get creative because you think it'll win, ping it through. So to sum that up, we're going to be doing $100 gift certificates to the 5 people we selected to critique their images. And we're going to give out 3 $50 gift cards to those with the most interesting questions. You can check out the Q&A little panel on the left side of your screen to see it. All right, first and foremost, we're going to dive right in. I want to give a little bit of info about what I am looking for when I am not only shooting, but when I am going into post-processing. First and foremost, I try to get everything I can right in camera, simply because with a heavy shooting workload, it's really hard to spend a lot of time in post, but oftentimes that is not possible to get the best lighting, to get the best posing, to get extraneous items out of the way when you're shooting. And sometimes it's even difficult to compose the way you want to if you're going for a really authentic moment or some sort of experience that's occurring ahead of time. So that's the goal is then is to be able to go into post and make those changes of the things that you couldn't do at the time. If you want to check out some of my work, you can go to tamaralackey.com and check out the galleries. You can see a lot of what I'm talking about as I work through this. We're going to dive into Photoshop, pull up an image, and start talking about what we can do with that kind of image, what's working with it, and what could really make a big difference. So we're going to start here with Ben Tobin's image. Congratulations, Ben, on submitting this image. You get $100 in a gift card, and all you have to do is email allie@nationsphotolab.com to get that. But I'm going to flip over to a screen share and show you some of what I would want to do when I was in Photoshop with this image. So I'm going to pull this up, zoom out, and I was already playing with this before we started, which is kind of cheating a little bit. But I'm going to pull back out and show you what I would do. So I'm working off of Allie's machine, and it's a PC, and I don't know anything but Mac. So if I seem a little clumsy, it's not intentional. So this is the original image that was submitted. I think we've got a really good feel here, cool location, cool looking model or subject. Specifically with this image, what I would want to do is first and foremost look at a couple things that I think could really have a big impact on shifting the way this image comes across to the viewer. First, I would look at the lighting. Lighting is so optimal and so key, and in every single image I'm shooting or delivering, I'm really thinking about lighting. And here, I think the way that we have him side lit, because of the way he's turned to the side, it looks like the main source of light here is the sun, which is really common when you're shooting outside. But I would want to have either an ability to fill some of this light or diffuse some of this light. And you can do that one of 2 ways. If you're going to fill the light, the ability to be able to fill in the shadows that are caused by the main light, you can use just a simple $20 reflector to be able to bounce that light back and even out some of the shadowing that we see here across his face. Specifically this kind of harsher line right here. I would love to see that softened a little bit so that the way the light is hitting is more gradual and works across a little bit more in a smooth manner. Same thing here across the shirt. How do we make this kind of harsh, shadowy line right here softer? So fill light would really have a big impact here. The second thing to consider is to diffuse the light. So to use a simple sheer panel that you are often can find within reflectors, the 5-in-1 reflectors, the 3-in-1 reflectors, they have a diffuser panel, and you can hold that up right up top, just basically arms up, tilting it a little bit, and diffuse that light so that when it hits your subject, it doesn't have those lines, those shadows, those harsh edges, and you'd be able to have that natural light kind of moving across. If you cannot do that at the time, you can make little shifts in post to be able to minimize that. One of my favorite tools for managing these harsh shadow lines is the patch tool, which is simply right here in Photoshop on the panel. You can just select the area that you want, pull it down a bit, and you can start to see how that line is becoming managed and mitigated just with one little stroke right there. That's where we started. That's where we get to, and I would just keep working through, but we're already really close there. I would do the same thing here on the shirt line if I wanted to make sure that this was kind of a smoother transition. Hopefully you can see where I'm heading there. So that's be the first thing I think about from a lighting perspective. One of the other things I would be considering is a composition. He is right smack dab in the middle of the frame, but he's looking off to the left. And this is the sort of image where you'd kind of want some room over there to move with him, to follow his eye line and see what he's seeing. Oftentimes when you have somebody looking at a frame and they're in the middle of the frame or on the edge towards where they're looking, you kind of come in as a viewer, you come into the frame and you leave it really quickly. And in this case, we want to stay a little bit longer. So I would just be able to, obviously if we were shooting this on the spot, I would change the orientation so that he was about here in the frame, you know, tilting the camera angle. So we had it something more like this. We can cheat a little bit with Edit Transform to see how that would look. This is obviously not the way I would have it done. What is this Mac? Come on, Mac. I would just, this is obviously now how I do it, but just to get a look at how that would look if you had simply tilted the lens of the angle. Now you can see when you look into the frame, you just have more room to go. You stay with the frame longer, and just that simple lens tilt could have a big impact in terms of composition. So those are a couple things that I would consider right away looking at this image of things that I think could really improve an otherwise great image. That is our first image that we went through. Congratulations, Ben Tobin. Again, email Allie to get your winnings. I'm going to go back here. And am I back on screen now? Have I done the screen sharing off? Okay. I believe I've come back. You see me back? What do you think? Okay, so good. I think I'm back. I've got some questions here. Good, because people are going to be winning. Here are some of the questions. I can hear you. Thank you. I can hear you and see you. Thank you. I think there's a little bit of a lag though, the Q&A is coming in. We have a question by Kyle Weaver. Which lens is the best for landscape photography? That's a great question. I love doing travel and landscape photography. It's not my main area. It's the thing I love to do when I'm not working. And I find that there are two lenses that I use very frequently for that. That being said, there's a third I'm going to mention that a lot of people do recommend. But for me, I shoot all Nikon, and I would photograph a lot of landscape shots with the 16-35. And I also really like the 24-70. When I go on extended trips where I don't want to bring a lot of gear, the 24-70 2.8 is the one I bring with me a lot of the time. The other lens that a lot of people love for this is the 70-200 2.8 because of the fact that you could stand back and really get some beautiful views, even though that is a long lens. A lot of people do love that for various types of landscape photography. So it's your choice whether or not you want that longer look or you want the much wider look. I tend to do a lot more of that wide look to show the whole scene. And so those would be three lenses that I would recommend to you. You could also go a lot wider with focal length and get into some of the more possibly distorted lenses in terms of having a bit of a fisheye, but you could do lens correction in Photoshop as well. Okay, so that is one. Look at these questions coming in. I can now see them and everything. This is great. Another question that came in that's very relevant to what we just did. When using the patch tool, this is from I think it's from Tara Giles. When using the patch tool to reduce the harsh shadow lines, will it leave the photo looking like there's definitely an edit, or will it look natural? I have done this on quite a few images that I have printed very, very large, and it looks extremely natural when done well. And the when done well part is important, because when I showed you roughly how I would do it, and I just put it on the shirt and pulled it back, that is not how I would leave it. To me, that would look very unnatural. It would be a matter of taking small pieces and simply moving through the whole shadow line versus one quick pull back. So that's a really important note for editing, is to kind of tackle those things a little bit at a time, so it looks very natural and very fluid, and simply like the light is just slowly moving through. In those cases, the patch tool can be very effective. There's also options for content aware tool and the clone tool, of course, but I find that patch is just the simplest way to cleanly move the line across. So hopefully that helps answer that question. All right, next one we have, this is from Tina Andrews, I believe, Kurdic. I have her read her own handwriting and confirm that I'm saying it right. Kurdic, yes. Okay, I'm gonna jump over and look at this image, but Tina, please contact Allie for your $100 gift card. We've already given away $200. Love the Oprah thing. All right, I'm going to jump over to screen share, go into Photoshop, and then pull up this image and talk a little bit about what we can do with that. Close. Don't apply. No. Oh, we've got some of these up here. All right, so this image, we are looking at, it looks like our subject is, this would look like either a senior or a teen kind of image in terms of the effect of it. And you're obviously showing with the, I'm going to go with soccer ball. I think that's a soccer ball. That look, I like the way that we're using more dramatic lighting. I appreciate the way the light is coming in. And just like I talked about in the last image where we had our subject in the middle of the frame, but he was looking out of the frame, and you tend to leave it pretty quickly. We don't have that issue here. We have our subject looking up into the top part of the frame and looking out. And that, I think, really works for this image. I think that's a very strong composition, and suits it very well. The one thing I noticed right away with this image, though, that I think could really make a difference, especially when it's printed, similar to the print I just showed you, is that we have lost some detail in the shadows. If you look at the dark parts of this image, especially the shirt, and certainly edges around that vignette, we have lost any sort of detail. If I were to zoom really closely in, and certainly if I'm trying to print this image, I'm going to find that I don't really have any texture or ability to see what's going on inside this shirt. So for all I know, it's just a block of dark. And that is something that we really want to be able to manage when we're shooting, or when we're in post, or when we are printing, because that does take away from the quality of the image. So in camera, when I'm shooting this image, I'm going to make sure that my dynamic range is there. I'm going to make sure that if I am shooting from an exposure perspective, that I am shooting with enough light in that area. So whether it's the light that's coming in or a bit of a fill light, if I find that that's blocking out, I'm going to make sure I take care of that while I'm shooting. In post, when you've already processed it, and these are low-res images, we brought them from the Facebook group, the Facebook post. But in post, if you have a raw image especially, there would be enough room in this image to be able to go back into the original and pull up the shadows in the darker parts of this image and manage it right there. You can also go and take the lasso tool in Photoshop and just try to lasso the areas that you think need the most amount of detail back. I'm holding down the shift key while I'm lassoing these sections so that everything I lasso gets held together. I kind of create a whole section there. And I would go in and set the refine edge so that I've got a good amount of feather, so that whatever effect I choose gets spread out across where that line is. And then I'm just going to go into image adjustments, levels, and then try to bring back some of that as best I can. As you can see, that's kind of working. It's a really low res image and we've got a lot of contrast on it. So you can slowly see that it's kind of working, but obviously we wouldn't leave it there and we'd be working with a raw image. But hopefully that shows you what I would want to see in terms of bringing back in the shadow detail on this image. Another thing, and this is just one thing I noticed when looking at this image, is when you're looking at brickwork or anything that is some sort of horizon lines, you start to very much notice any sort of distortion in the lens. Even the best of lenses can have distortion based on how close or far you're shooting from a certain amount of architecture. And one of the nice things in Photoshop is this lens correction tool here in the filter. You can just click lens correction and it'll automatically do something for you. I tend to go into custom and then do it by eye. So shift things based on what I want. And then I look at that top and I look at that bottom. And you kind of see how, wait, why is the top straight and the bottom seems to have rounded, or vice versa? You can go in and play with that and fix it. There's quite a lot of power in this tool in terms of being able to manage it from a vertical perspective, being able to manage it from a horizontal perspective, and then certainly the overall removing of distortion. But I'd want to go in there and make it so that top line was straight across and that bottom line was straight across. And if you can't do that while you're on the scene, you can do that in post. Okay, hopefully that was helpful. I'm going to jump back in here and say congratulations again to Tina Andrews Furtick. Go get your $100. All right, we have some good amount of questions coming through. Let's see. This is, okay, so this actually would relate a little bit to what we just showed. I love candid moments, but pose photos are really what my clients look for in terms of professional images. This is from Beth Willard Patton. To present a broad gallery, how do you encourage clients to be more playful instead of too posy? That's a really good question, and that's, I think, a very common concern, although I think you phrased it very well. I find that is something that I'm consistently looking at as well every shoot I do. And what I have found that for me, the easiest way to manage that is to simply do both. And every shoot I do, I'm going up on Creative Live next week for Tuesday through Thursday, and I'll be doing a lot of this and show exactly how I do the safer images. And you're right, a lot of clients do want a certain kind of pose look because that tends to be what they buy, because that's what they've always known. And just because it's posed doesn't mean it doesn't have to have, really beautiful emphasis on the relationships or the expression. You can have that and have a controlled look at the same time. But what I try to do is have that as well as the candid, playful things. And the way I encourage that is to make sure clients know that we got the safe shots that they wanted. That's taken care of. We're good there. Now we're just going to play for a little while. And that's a great way to have an even mix of both and be able to have a collection of images you give back to your clients that really show all of it. So it's like they get what they want and you get what you want. So hopefully that helped. Thank you, Beth. We've got another question. Is the 70-200 2.8 good for wedding photography? What would you recommend for wedding photography? I think it's really, really difficult to photograph weddings without a lens like that, because there are a number of times where you are pretty far back and you want to be able to be in the moment. And I think I used the 70-200 2.8 lens on every single wedding I shot, which was about 250 weddings over the course of 7 years. And I couldn't imagine shooting a wedding without it. I would highly recommend that if you don't have that lens or you can't afford that lens, but you want to photograph weddings, that you rent that lens for the wedding day. At least try it out. It'd be really hard for you to give it up after you do try it out, but you could also rent it for every wedding you shoot, and just to be able to have that in your arsenal. I think that's really important. All right. Let's move on to the next image, our third image. This one is by Emily Carlisle. Yay, Emily. Emily, please contact Allie at nationsphotolab.com to get your $100. We're going to start saying $100 cooler. Give me another way to say it for the next one, will you? Something really cool. All right, screen share. What's that? Buckaroos? I don't know, buckaroos. I think we're getting somewhere. St. James, no. All right, here we are, Emily. Yay. Really sweet image. It's so funny. I love shooting in roads too. I think there's just so much especially when they're curving and they're moving around. There's so much beauty to them. I like how you shot right with those lines, kind of leading lines right into your subjects. That's fantastic. I like that it looked like nobody got hurt. That can happen sometimes. I once had a situation where a car came around so fast, and it really actually similar kind of setup to this, where a car came around so fast we didn't see it, we didn't hear it, and everybody was scrambling. And I was just wishing somebody could have done a BTS shot for that, given that everybody was safe. But yeah, so I love the location. You definitely have a really sweet moment between these two. I think a couple things that I'd want to consider is the coloring. We've got this really lovely fall coloring, which is great. The thing that I noticed, and when you look at images and having done judged so many different competitions and such, this is a pretty common theme that a lot of people will talk about, is that if you were to squint your eyes and look at the image, your eye tends to go to the point of most contrast. And here, it's not really the couple so much as that bright, bright, golden, gorgeous light above them. And really what you want in this case is for the eye to go to your subjects. So one of the first things I would consider in this image is just burning that down a little bit. And what I mean by that is traditionally you would go in and you could use the burn tool. Make sure you have protect tones checked on there. And you could kind of burn this to darken it so it's just not the brightest part of the image. That's kind of a really simple way to try to manage that. You could also do the selection option that I showed you, where we lasso it and level it down, or use curves tool to bring down the toning. Those are a couple good options there. But I would make sure that I would have that something that's managed. You also see this brightness coming off these trees. Just bring it down a little bit so that really our attention goes to the couples and the couple and their relationship. The other thing, before I printed this, and I noticed this so often, we get a lot of large prints from nations, which we love to have in our studio and to sell, and I just love work printed big. And little things that aren't going to bother me in an image like this will drive me nuts in a large image. And things like this with this telephone wires and this pole. This with the new content aware tool, I guess it's not that new anymore, but with the content aware tool, it's easy enough to just get rid of that. So I would do that, especially printing this for my clients. And it's simply a matter of selecting the wire, hitting the backspace key on your keyboard. Obviously works for a Mac as well as a PC. Sometimes people have other things selected here for the use button, but if you haven't used this before, you may want to make sure you go in and select content aware, and then just click OK. And Photoshop does just an amazing job dropping out the parts of the image you don't want there. This used to take 8 million years with the clone tool. I know because I've done it quite a lot over the course of my 12 years of shooting professionally. But now you can do this in, honestly, 2 minutes. I'm doing it very quickly for you. Back to the original question of how natural does this look. If you take a little bit of time with it and you slowly do this, and again, I don't think it's more than 2 minutes, you eventually get rid of this little sight back here that is going to distract you, and in a large image is going to be taking away from your clients. The other thing you get back is this whole, hopefully you can see this just as well as I see it. What you end up getting back is this look where it really feels like they're just alone in the woods, right? You know, here it looks like they're alone on a highway, or whatever the case might be. It just gives this more whole overall natural look. And I think it really improves the image. The last thing I would note about this image is simply, it's interesting. We have this is a low res, obviously, so let me zoom out a little bit so don't see the pixelation. We have her hand up here, and from a posing perspective, I'd love to see that dropped a little bit like his is, just a little bit more relaxed, or maybe on his face or something. But sometimes you just get the sweet moments, and they're the moments you have, and the hands are where they are, and I have those photographs and love them, so that's not a big deal. But what I do think that we could do a little bit here is we have that shadow right there, just like we had on that first image we critiqued. And I would use the exact same method for managing that, either on the shoot with a diffuser panel, or move them more into even shade, or use the patch tool to calm that down. Hopefully that helps. I'm gonna go ahead and jump back in to where we are. We are cranking. We are doing really well. All right, let's see. It's going back into updating the questions. This is from, I can't tell if it's the person above or below that is the question. I think it's the person, I'm gonna look at this. I think it's the person below. I'm gonna say it is. Okay, so the person below, and this one is Kenyatta Street. Do you prefer to shoot portraits in black and white or color or a little bit of both? I shoot 100% of my images in color, and then I decide whether or not I want to have them delivered in black and white later in post, but I don't shoot anything directly in black and white. Even when I know while I'm shooting it that it's absolutely going to be a black and white, I shoot it in color, because the amount of times I've had clients say, I love that, but can I get it in color? I want to be able to say yes, and then go back and be able to pull that one. Thank you. Another question from Jennifer White. I really love making people's eyes pop. What is the best way to do that when you're shooting them? And the add more contrast in Photoshop. What is the best way to do that when you're shooting them and the add more contrast in Photoshop? What do we think that question means? And to add more contrast. Maybe if you're there, I think this is from Jennifer White. If you could clarify the question, but let me start with the first part of the question, which I have is pretty clear. What is the best way to make the eyes pop? So we actually just did a full day of photographing puppies yesterday, which was amazing. I'm like in that afterglow. It was awesome. If you go to my Facebook page, Tamara Lackey Photography, you'll see a big post there. You guys shared it. It's also on Nations Photo Lab's Facebook page. You can see just a quick sampling that I grabbed this morning. There's quite a lot more I can't wait to get to. But you can see in that's a perfect situation where we have fast-moving subjects, extraordinarily fast-moving subjects, and a lot of chaos going on, and we still wanted to make sure that the puppy's eyes were popping. And I use the same technique I do with people, which is to, as best as possible, if you're in a more controlled environment, use a single shot focus and be able to literally use the single shot, that little red dot. I place it between the eyes, whether it's a human or a puppy. You have to go see those pictures. I'm going to get myself a Boston Terrier and a Golden Retriever tomorrow. But that one of the two things is the focus point, the single shot. Make sure that those are set up from a focus perspective. Make sure you're stable, and that means either being on a tripod, a monopod, or making sure you're securing yourself when you shoot. And the other big tip there is make sure your shutter speed is up. So often people will present an image to me and say the eyes aren't sharp, what's the problem? And I go in and their shutter speed is at 1/40th. And it's really tough to get sharp eyes with a slow shutter speed. You want to have a shutter speed that's fast enough to be able to get a really clear, sharp image. Lastly, I would talk, not lastly, but another point I would talk about is lighting, making sure you have enough lighting on your subjects. With these puppies, we have a lot of reflectors in front of the puppies, popping the catch light in the eyes, but also making the eyes sharp and popping out from the frame. Made a big difference. So hopefully that helps. Okay, let us move on. We still have another image here from Marilyn Malone Law. No, Merlin Malone Law. Is that little baby? Little baby. Merlin, please contact Allie at nationsphotolab.com to get your $100. We still have 3 $50 gift cards to give out after this one and the next $100. But let me do a quick screen share, and we're going to jump over into Photoshop and look at the cute little toddler and talk about what we can do with this image. Okay, so we have a beautiful blue-eyed baby here, and one of the things I noticed is we've got a nice center frame. I like the location with the flowers; they're really pretty, and obviously we've got just a very sweet subject that you're drawn to anyway. I would love to see in this image a shift in the angle at which we photograph. I think if the angle of this image had been taken from a lower perspective, we wouldn't have had so much of that looking down on the baby look, and that could have made a big difference. I'm not sure if she's looking at the person taking the photograph or looking above the lens, but that would help a little bit if we wanted to have eye contact, to have the angle of the lens be lower in this frame. The other thing I noticed is in terms of the coloring is, and I know it's hard to talk about coloring sometimes in webinars because everybody's looking at a different screen. And so with one person, they're like, what do you mean? The color's awesome. Another person, they're like, it's out of control. So I will just tell you from what I'm seeing, looking at this print and the image I saw on my monitor, we have a lot of yellow and green across this image. And sometimes you can just simply go in and click auto color. Sometimes you can go in and click auto tone, and those could make the difference. There's 18 million different ways to manage color. My favorite would be to open up the raw file and shift the color there. But you can also go into image adjustments, color balance, and try to manage it in here. If you see, gosh, there's a lot of yellow and there's a lot of red, let's move the slider away from the yellow and let's move the slider away from the red, something like that. And we find that our color starts shifting. So again, you can play with this on your screen. It's gonna look different for you as it is gonna look for me. But I would play with the color on this, or if you're getting it printed, ask Nations Photo Lab to adjust the color for you. But I think shifting the color on this image makes a big, big difference right there. Lastly, I think when we're looking at this image, we talked a little bit about the hands and the and posing. It's really difficult with toddlers to pose hands. You're just like lucky if you get them stopped in any way. But certainly one little kind of technique that does work is to hold toddlers' hands together for a second, make a game out of it, and jump back and get the shot. And often they'll stay there just for the second of watching you. Again, it's the same technique we used yesterday with the puppies, actually. You kind of hold them in a spot first and then go get the shot. That's a technique I use to some pretty good effect, and that's something you might want to try out too. All right, jumping back. Whew. Let us go here. All right, we got a lot more questions coming in too. Let's see. From Beth Willard Patton. Those puppies are so cute. I know. God, it was like a melt fest of happiness being around them. Thank you very much. Let's see. Another question here from Beth is, do you crop in post or do you try to crop your images in camera? That's actually a great question because my answer has changed a lot over time. I used to always try to crop in camera. And the mindset there is a good one. Crop in camera and don't have to do it later in post and be done. What I found, however, is sometimes I was losing the ability to be able to get the expression I wanted or the interaction I wanted because I was so busy trying to do composition and frame it well that I found that the trade-off wasn't worth it. I would much rather have the expression I want and the moment I want and then fix it in post if need be. So the answer is dual. If I have the time and the ability to be able to set up my shot and get what I want, I will always crop in camera. If it's a very fast moving situation and there's a lot of chaos, which again seems to be a lot of my shoots, then I will get the best experience that I can get in terms of in the frame and then crop later in Lightroom. So that is how I will do that. Thank you for that question. Here's another one from Ginger Franklin. Do you find that your clients want to be posed or do they mind if you just play by ear and let the session be casual? You know, I used to always think that when you're photographing families that the last thing they want is to be posed. I used to talk about how, you know, we're not overly posed in terms of how the experience will be. And what I found is it isn't that clients don't want to be posed. The clients don't want to be stiff. They don't want to be unnatural. They don't want it to look like we're forcing this image of them together. So oftentimes they are looking at me like, well, what do you want me to do? And that's how I feel when I sit down. Like, you want to give me some direction here? I do believe that's part of our job as photographers is to give direction. So I do give direction. I start them from somewhere, but I very much encourage them to move more into who they are, and we'll shift and adjust as we go. And again, if you want to see real-time examples of that, I'll be doing a lot of family shooting, family photography next week on Creative Live, Tuesday through Thursday. Okay. Let's do one more question, and then we're gonna jump out to our last photograph. Let's see. This is from Kenyatta Street. I know you excel at portraits, and that is your main type of photography you shoot, but what other types of photography do you like to shoot in your spare time, if any? Also, do you dabble in fine art photography? Hey, that's a cool question. I like that. I love travel photography. We, as a family, my husband and I and our 3 kids travel 2 months out of the year, every year. And we'll be doing it again this summer, going through from Seattle through the national parks and then out to Africa again. And I love to shoot as much as I can as we go. There's actually a section on my website under the galleries for, I think it's called Around the World, that shows a lot of those shots that I've taken. So that's the other type of photography that I really, truly love. I also do a lot of editorial portraits of sports figures, only because my husband publishes a fitness magazine, Endurance Magazine, and I do a lot of the photographs of people for either covers or spreads or whatever may be. I just did a really fun shoot with Chris McDougall, who wrote Born to Run. Not sure if you read it. It's a really good book. But he's currently on the new cover of Endurance Magazine. And we did parkour. So I actually was climbing with him on this little like city playground, and that was just very fun. And by climbing, I mean he was climbing and I was just trying to get to where he was. I didn't really climb. All right, let's get to our last image. This one is by, and then we'll choose the 3 best questions that I'm gonna make Allie choose. Allie, you have to choose them. Choose the 3 best questions. Actually, I'll choose them if you don't want to. She just gave me a look of terror. So I'll choose them, and then we'll give another $150 away. But this $100 is going to Aline de Mello. Aline de Mello. I hope I'm saying everybody's names right, for submitting this image. And let's pop over and look at it. And I think my thoughts on, let's say, goodbye, baby. Okay. All right, this image, I think this is called, I think I remember this, something like what the fox or something like that. It's really cute. So I think this image, I chose this because I thought it was a great example of, obviously, such a cute girl. Love the little expression and her eyes, the way they're lit up, and I don't usually do a lot in the way of props and clothing and stuff like that, but I think it can often work in a really fun way. And here, I think it really adds to the playfulness of the image. I thought this image was a great example of looking at your frame and wondering if there was a different orientation you could have taken that would have might have had an impact. And I think simply rotating this image starts getting us to a place that gets really interesting, that can actually take this image to a level that we can do a lot with. Rotating and then adjusting in terms of just the crop of it. I would have loved to have seen her either here in terms of this image, and then a lot of tree underneath, I think could have looked really cool. And you could have done some of that in post, or even as is in terms of the crop, just sliding it a little bit so we're a little more straightened up. And then seeing what we could do with really emphasizing the texture here. So if we had an opportunity to emphasize the texture here, one of the best ways to do that is to do something with black and white. So this image, even though we've got the fun color in the ears, I'm going to do this really rough just to keep within our time frame. But I would take the edit transform option and pull this image out a little bit. Obviously, if I could have done it in camera, I would have just shot it with more room over there. But that's just to give you a rough feel of what it'd be. Let's do this a little differently. And so that's where I would have taken it. But then I will go into just a really simple black and white. Let's just throw that down here. Darken a little bit. Emphasize the contrast. And I try when I do this to do this with everything that you would have on your machine too, if you have either Photoshop or Lightroom, so you don't have to, oh, 1 second, let me go backwards. So you don't have to go out and necessarily buy anything that I'm doing. All right, here we go. So I would do a duplicate the layer, and then you come into here, these opacity sliders, and then just give it a little pop with the ability to boost that contrast of some soft light. And you start seeing where we can take this in terms of, again, I'd like to pull that left side out a little bit, but just to show you where we can take this. Let's flatten the image, and then we can add a little bit of toning. Just add some color in the color balance tool. And battery stretch. Just got a note that battery can be stretched in your laptop, just so you know, Allie. And then you just start getting somewhere. So this to me is really interesting because we can really play with this image. I would love to burn down the texture on this a little bit. Remember I talked about burning down, just literally going into the burn tool and making this a little bit darker and deeper and having that go. You can even do a really soft vignette up here if you wanted to. There's a lot of places to take this, but it's starting with that bright color image and making it a little bit more dramatic, a little deeper, a little more interesting, and flipping the orientation completely. So just another way to think about how you can frame and be doing that. All right, let us go back here. And we've got more questions. Awesome. And now I'm going to be also selecting my 3 other questions. But we are at the final part of the questions. If anybody had any questions about all those, the 5 images and the 5 selected images for the critique, please let me know what we did. But otherwise, you guys all write into Allie@nationsphotolab.com to get your $100 gift card. I'm going to answer a couple more of these and then start giving the $50 gifts away. Here's one from Tara. Tara Giles, how do we crop and post while still being able to get a variety of prints? As you know, cropping changes how different print sizes are cropped. How do we crop in post while still being able to get a variety of prints? Oh, so if you were to, okay, so I believe the question is, if you were to just crop as you wish and have fun with it, how can you make sure that you're still printing a certain size? We actually do quite a lot of variety, and Nations Photo Lab will take something, if for instance it needs to be printed on a 16 by 20 canvas, but we want it delivered as an 18 by 20, we will crop to the size that we think looks cool, so it's 18 by 20, but then just slide that onto a white background that's sized to 16 by 20. And that's a way that we can be able to deliver the print we want at the size we want and not worry about how the print sizes are cropped. So Tara, you had some great questions here, and you are going to get a $50 gift card. So just write to Allie@nationsphotolab.com and you will get that. Jennifer White asks, how do I get good pictures of children 2 and under? That's an awesome question. I not recently now, gosh, it's been a few months, did a behind the scenes video for Nikon where we worked exactly with that age with toddlers. And if you go to the Nikon's YouTube channel, so it's YouTube at Nikon USA, you'll see a behind the scenes with me, with Tamara Lackey, and you'll see one with just working with toddlers. And I have a lot of tips in there about working with 2-year-olds and under. But a significant amount of it is being able to make everything a game. That is really kind of where you're going to make them come alive and get the expressions you want. And you have to leave any sort of static notions about how this goes out of it. You just have to be able to do that. Okay, so we have a question by Beth Willard Patton. Beth, you've had a couple great questions. Let me give you a $50, this is fun giveaway, $50 gift card, Beth. Go ahead and write to Allie@nationsphotolab.com to get that. Which portrait lens do you like better, the 35 or the 50? Oh, the 35 hands down. I hardly ever use the 50 actually. I know a lot of people who love the 50. It's probably the lens I use the least by a lot. I have it, and there's a couple times where it makes sense to use it. But for me, it's just not my favorite orientation, so I don't use it much orientated. My favorite focal length, I like things to be a little more off, either the longer length or the shorter focal length. So that is what I use. Okay, and let me see if I think we've gotten most of these, and I know we're past our 45 minutes, but let's round it down a little bit. Oh, so how do you add more contrast in Photoshop if you don't have enough in the original photo? Oh, okay. Thank you, Jennifer White, for clarifying that. How do you add more contrast in Photoshop if you don't have enough in the original photo? What you would do is, there's quite a number of ways to do this, but if I'm going to jump back into a screen share, I can show you really quick in Photoshop. This image, for instance, if I wanted to add more contrast to it, I can simply go in and go into image adjustments and then brightness and contrast, and I could work right here. This is the simplest way to do it, and I could boost contrast. Obviously, that's a lot of contrast, but just to show you one of the probably 800 ways to do it is really simply right there, is to go into image adjustments and contrast. When you start playing with this more and more, you'll see so many ways to do this. I like to have it be more luminescent and with a little bit more of a soft contrast boost, but that is the simplest way to do that. So that's a real-time answer. And let's see, we've got, I think that is most of them. Susan Murray asked, what is your opinion of watermarking the image? Some watermarks appear to interfere with the image, drawing the eye to the watermark. That's a great question. If you go back to those puppy images we were just talking about, if you go to my Facebook page, you'll see exactly how I watermark the images. That's one of the ways. I used a simple white backdrop, but I basically put a little tag on the bottom, and then I stamp it with my logo. I don't hardly ever put it on the image unless there's an image that's so clear and open that there's no problem putting it on there. I think actually one of the puppies I actually stamped on the image, but that was the only one that I did that with because it made sense actually. But otherwise I always put a little tag on my images, and you can see that way. Okay, good. And then I think the, what was the question here we had that we thought was really strong? I'm gonna find it. This is our final winner. Oh, Kenyatta Street. I love the question about moving beyond your main style of portraits. So Kenyatta, please email Allie@nationsphotolab.com. And I think we got a lot done there. All right, do you want to do a nice little close? Thank you guys very much for your questions and for tuning in. If you have any follow-up questions, you can reach me on Twitter or Facebook or social media, all at tamaralackey.com.
Thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you, Tamara. This was very helpful. I hope everyone enjoyed your hour with Tamara, and hopefully we get to do another critique and technique with you very soon.
Yes.
Yeah, you signed up for it?
I'm sure.
All right. We'll definitely take a look at our Facebook page and our emails and see when the next one will be with Tamara.
Wonderful. I'll do that too.
Yeah, you should be involved. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.